Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallama ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa nafa'na bima tu'allimna wa zidna min fadlika ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So, Assalamu alaikum to everybody. We are returning to our youth halaqah after the Ramadan break, Alhamdulillah, and we're still in lockdown, so we're not able to get to the masjid just yet. And normally we have our halaqahs in the masjid and they're very interactive. So, we are inshallah going to be doing some stories tonight. But before we do that, we have some good news. And I hope you're all well and you all had a very good Ramadan. So tonight, what we're going to do, we had an essay competition in Ramadan, as you may know, and it was about the Quran, and the title of it was My Connection to the Quran. And so we had four different levels. We had level one, level two, level three, and level four. And these were based on the ages. So I'm going to announce now the levels and the winner of that level. And then, inshallah, there will be more detail on the WhatsApp group of who the judges were, etc. So we have four winners tonight, Alhamdulillah. And so in the first level, which was the youngest age category, we have Layyan Al Qatawi. So, mashallah, you got the first prize for that. And level two, we have Inaya Yahya, mashallah. And I should say the age is two, that's age 12. And Layyan is 9 years old. And level three is Asia Khan, and that's age 14. And level four, which was for, I'm guessing, the 16 plus, the older group, the winner is Ayman Fatima, age 18. So, mashallah, these are the winners of this year's Quran competition, Ramadan Quran competition, for writing the essay. And I was one of the judges, and I have to say that it was really difficult, especially the first, second, third, to come up with those because they were good quality, very good quality, and the marks are very close. So well done to everybody, whoever entered this competition, and it was very inspirational for us to read about how you interact with the Quran, and the motivation you get at home from your parents, and if you're older, then what groups you set up yourselves, and what classes you take so that you can further your journey on the Quran. So that's a really good thing, mashallah. So congratulations to you all, and I believe your gift cards, which are $100 each, mashallah, are going to be sent out to you. So that's a great prize as well, and you get to choose what you want to spend that on. And inshallah, we'll do more competitions, and this should be a motivation to you that you should enter and take part in these, because it gives you encouragement to do better in not just in writing essays and looking at how your written word, but also it helps you to think, and it helps you to um, get a lot of other skills as well. So this is a good thing, alhamdulillah. And I hope in all communities that we can put out different competitions for the children so that it can motivate them to do well, inshallah. So without further ado, we're going to go into our stories tonight. And this is one of my favorite um, authors and stories as well, I would say. And I studied this a very long time ago. It's called the Mathnawi, and you might have heard this. It's written by Rumi, and he lived a very long time ago. So his original Mathnawi was written in the 13th century, and that would roughly be the equivalent of the 7th Islamic century. So it's a very long time ago. And at that time, if you look in history, and we won't go into this right now, but it was a time of great peril and danger, and a lot of things were going on. There were lots of invasions, a lot was happening in the world. And many times we, especially today, we look at the world and we say, oh, now this, what's going on? And we are looking at these things, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to go back and look at history to see that it's never been good. Since we've been on earth, since human beings have been on earth, there's always been a lot of turmoil and a lot of bloodshed and wars and upheaval, and also a lot of migrations, people moving, being shifted from here to there. So this is at that time when Rumi was born, rahmatullah alayhi, this was a time of a lot of great turmoil like that. So we look at his life in more detail later on, inshallah. I just wanted to give you the time frame that it was at this time. It's 13th century and the 7th Islamic century, so that's a very long time ago. And he was basically a scholar, and he had studied the books, and then he also became a spiritual guide. That means he had that one type of knowledge which was from the books, and then he got a knowledge um, which he when he met his teacher, who was called Shams Tabriz, he ignited a genius that lay dormant in Rumi's soul. There was something inside Rumi's soul that he ignited. It was like a diamond that just suddenly had to come out. And this is when Rumi really, like, kind of um, took off. Like, his work really took off because he went into a spiritual dimension, and then he wrote all these books. And the Masnavi is actually a long poem. Let's have a quick look at that. So it's spiritual couplets. That's what it means, and it's a poetic collection of anecdotes and stories derived from the Quran, Hadith sources, and everyday tales. So some of the stories you're going to find in Rumi's stories are maybe cultural stories, like things that happen in his town or with his people, and they're not necessarily from the Quran and the Hadith, but a lot of them are. And these stories are told to illustrate a point, and each moral is discussed in detail. So basically, his stories are about moral stories, and sometimes he doesn't explain them. He'll just, kind of leave it there, and then you have to go and you have to look at it, and then you can, basically you have to figure out what he's saying. So that was the beauty of it. And his Masnavi is written in 6 books of poetry. So altogether there's 6 books, and there's about 25,000 verses and 50,000 lines, right? So there's so much in it. So it's you could say on the one hand that it's like a one big poem, but it's also got all of these little rivulets. So he might be talking about something and then illustrate it with a story, and then do some poetry around it, and then a story within a story. So it's really fascinating to read. So maybe we'll talk about Rumi later on in more detail about what he stood for. But today we're going to go right into the stories, and these have been written especially for the youth, for young adults. So they've been adapted from the Masnavi for young adults. So the first story I'm going to read today is called "The Donkey's Gone, the Donkey's Gone." And you have to remember that even though he lived a very long time ago, one of the things that this is one of the reasons why Rumi has become so famous in the West as well. He's one of the most read people in the West. The reason is because his stories are so universal that even though they were written so long ago, they can apply today. And the scenery might be different, right? It might look a little bit different, but basically they are uh, the human beings have not changed. So you'll see in these stories that we can derive a lot about human psychology, and that's one of the big things that Rumi Rahmatullahi was very big on, that he wanted to talk about the human experience, and he wanted to talk about the human soul. So let's get into the story. It's called The Donkey's Gone, The Donkey's Gone. So once there lived a poor dervish. A dervish is basically a pious person who doesn't have much. He doesn't have much in the way of home and hearth and family. So they just make do in the world. So this dervish, he had a donkey which he would ride on in his travels from one place to another. During the day he would travel about as was his custom, and at night, if he should come upon a house of dervishes or an inn, he would spend the night in their company. If he did not find such a place, he would sleep in a mosque or in some ruins. He used to say to himself, "Whatever night falls, or wherever it falls, there is my bed." So basically, he would sleep wherever he ended up. And, he believed in providence. That means Allah provides. So he didn't worry too much about where he's going to sleep, what he's going to eat. And it was usually the case that something would turn up. So, since the dervish had no family and owned nothing, and he possessed no skills to live, he would recite poetry about morals and in praise of the prophets and religious leaders in villages and towns, and then move on. He was able to survive on the gifts of money, food, and other articles that the people gave him. In his own world, he was content and he thanked God for his bounty. So, because he didn't have any family and he didn't own anything, and he didn't have any skills, how he would live is that he would recite poetry in praise of the prophets, and he would tell stories wherever he would go. And then, in exchange for that, people would give him gifts of money, food, and other things. And he was very content with that. He was very happy with Allah for that. The only thing the dervish owned, other than the clothes on his back, was that very donkey. With it, he was able to roam God's world and learn lessons from the world's good and evil. He hadn't spent much time thinking about food and eating. He used to say, "An open mouth does not remain without its daily bread. As long as it is my portion and fate, there will be enough to keep me alive from whatever source. All that is needed is a heart free from the worry about what I have and don't have." And this freedom, too, the dervish had. Now, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this dervish, wandering dervish, whose only possession is that donkey, and he's not even worried about his food, because he says, "An open mind, an open mouth does not remain without its daily bread." That means it's daily bread, Allah is going to provide for it. And so this is the idea of tawakkul, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is provides for us, and it's still true today. However, um, why is it that we cannot relate to this idea? And I see that some of you are online. You can start writing, and I'll pick up on your thread, and if you have any questions, I'll pick up on those as well. So um, so basically, this idea is the idea of providence, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides, and tawakkul, that wherever, if Allah has put you in the world, He's going to provide for you. So the question is, why is it that today we have a hard time accepting this idea? So one day, when the dervish was crossing a desert with his donkey, and he was tired, exhausted, hungry, and thirsty, he came upon a village. He drank water from the first irrigation ditch he came upon, and washed his face and hands. While refreshing himself, he gave his donkey to drink its fill. Then he went in search of a dervish inn. Some men pointed out a garden and said that there was such an inn there. So the dervish went to it and looked at the Sufis and dervishes that were gathered there. He led his donkey to the stable, and after putting some hay into the manger, he told the stable hand to groom the animal. Then he went back to the assembly of dervishes. So he'd found a place to stay that night, and he was very happy. There were many different kinds of dervishes at the inn. There were upright Sufis and tired dervishes. There were broken hearted beggars and tight lipped rogues, in short, all kinds of men. The Sufis and dervishes welcomed the new arrival and greeted him warmly, but the rogues in the inn, who had seen the newcomer arrive with a donkey that he had put in the stable, made more of a fuss over him than any of the others, and showed him much honor. One of the rascals prayed loudly to God for the newcomer's good health in the manner of true dervishes. Another showed him to the place of honor in the assembly. Still another, with great warmth, asked him how he was and gently engaged the new arrival in conversation, while still others signaled and gestured to each other and then left the assembly quietly. In truth, they were always in wait for such an event, that a stranger would come to them and have something of value with him that they could use for themselves. And now this dervish had arrived with a donkey which was now tied up in the stable. Right? So these are people looking for trouble, aren't they? Right? So they always look out for the stranger who's going to come in, and so they can rob them. The scoundrels collected together and headed straight for the stable and stole the dervish's donkey. In another street, they sold the animal to a passerby who was ignorant of what had happened. The thieves then spent the money on food and drink and sweetmeats and whatever else they fancied, and returned to the inn. Yet they returned and gleefully invited all in the assembly to share in a feast in honor of their recently arrived guest. They all exclaimed, "The pleasure of the arrival of a dervish is love." The dervish was very happy and pleased with the hospitality of the inn. They all ate a heavy supper of many kinds of food and enjoyed the sweets and various drinks, having a good time as dervishes will. The dervish was offered tidbits and made to feel welcome by all present. They shook the dust off his clothes and kissed his hands and prayed for his well-being. They beseeched the Lord for his glory. The party grew more animated as the night went on. Gradually the dervishes began to recite poetry and clap hands. Soon they were stomping and moving around. At the signal from the thieves, the minstrel began to sing and beat a drum. Since he knew about the theft and the sale of the dervish's donkey, that was the first thing that occurred to him to sing about. So he beat his drum and sang this verse in a loud voice: "Joy has come and sorrow has gone. The donkey's gone, the donkey's gone, the donkey's gone, the donkey's gone, the donkey's gone." The thieves joined in the minstrel's song and sang loudly, "The donkey's gone, the donkey's gone." Everyone was excited and shouted. They jumped up and down and continued to repeat that verse. Now the visiting dervish, when he saw the liveliness of the men, forgot his own exhaustion. Thinking that the words "the donkey's gone" had some special significance to the dervishes at the inn, he joined in the singing. He began to enjoy himself so much that he sang more loudly than the rest, "The donkey's gone, the donkey's gone." The party continued for a couple of hours, and then, when the hour had become late and they were worn out from their singing and dancing, some of the dervishes left while another group stayed at the inn. Our dervish too stayed behind, and since he was tired from his journey, he found a spot and went to sleep. Early the next morning, all of the dervishes left on their own business, while our Sufi woke up later than the rest. After making ready to travel and not knowing what had happened, he went to the stable and to take his donkey, but the animal was not in the stable. He thought to himself, "The groom has probably taken the donkey for a drink of water." But when the groom came back, he did not bring the dervish's donkey with him. "Where's my donkey?" the dervish demanded of the groom. "What donkey?" the groom sneered. "What do you mean?" cried the dervish. "The donkey I put in your charge last night." The groom made fun of the dervish. "Look at this long beard." The dervish grew agitated. "My dear fellow, what kind of talk is this? I'm telling you to bring my donkey, and you're making fun of me." Are we buddies to fool around together? Hurry up, bring the donkey. I want to get started. If you think you can get rid of me with this nonsense, you've got another thing coming. I'll go to the judge and lodge a complaint against you. I'll disgrace you." The groom snapped, "You're the one who is the fool, my good fellow. Where do you think all that food and drink, hot and cold, that we consumed last night came from? It all came from the money they got for selling the donkey, right?" "Oh my God!" wailed the dervish. "My donkey! Who gave you permission to sell my donkey?" The groom replied, "I didn't sell it. The thieves sold it." "Then why did you give them my donkey? Wasn't I its owner?" "Well, they were too many for me. They were 10 men and they scared me. They told me that they were going to take the donkey, and if I said anything, they'd take revenge on me. I was afraid for my life, so I stayed quiet. They even left 2 men with me to make sure that I didn't go to the party. Yes, sir, that's the way it was, until the affair heated up and no one knew what he was doing." "Supposing that what you say is true," said the dervish, "and they took the donkey in broad daylight. I was still here. You should have let me know a half hour, an hour, or even a couple of hours later, so that I could recognize them and start a fight with them. I could have gotten good men to arbitrate between us and try to get my money back. That wouldn't have put you in any danger." The groom nodded. "That is true. In fact, 2 hours after the festivities had started, I went there to call you and let you know what had happened. But when I went in, I saw that you were enjoying yourself and making more of a commotion than anyone else. You yourself were celebrating the donkey's departure. You were dancing and bellowing, 'The donkey's gone, the donkey's gone.' I figured that you knew about the affair, and there was nothing more for me to say," continued the groom. "I said to myself that the dervish is an upright man, a saint, and he seems to delight in making the other dervishes happy by selling his own donkey and using the money for a party. If you were in my place, what would you have done?" The dervish admitted that the groom was right. "Now I realize this was all my own mistake. I followed them in their behavior blindly, without understanding or knowledge. I became as one of them. If I had thought about the meaning of the donkey's gone from the very beginning, none of this would have happened. Now there is nothing I can do. It was my blind imitation of their behavior that caused you to misunderstand the situation. If I had not sung the song of the thieves more loudly than they did, I would not have lost my donkey." That's the end of the story. So, what is the moral of this story, or what are the morals of the story? So, first of all, it's teaching us that we should not blindly copy anybody, right? Because we don't know sometimes we don't know the whole situation and we don't know what's going on, and it can get us into a lot of trouble. So that's the first moral that we learn from this story. And the other, if you look at this story, there's, usually in these stories, there's lots of little points that we can pull out, and everybody sees it differently. So it's always a good idea. These teaching stories are like that people see it from their own perspectives. So I want you to think about this story as well. One of the things that really came out to me was that words are very important, because they were singing the song, and when they were singing, they said that the donkey's gone, the donkey's gone. So the dervish didn't recognize that it had an actual meaning, right? It wasn't just part of a song, but it actually had a meaning, that the words had a meaning. So even slogans that come out, and sometimes in advertising they have slogans. They have very powerful slogans which sell merchandise, but many times they have a lot of hidden meanings as well. So we should be careful before we take those slogans and we make them our own. We have to be very careful with words. That's one of the things that we learn from this story. Another thing is about people, that there's good and bad people in the world, and we know that. And um, we, especially when we go to a strange place or a place we're not familiar with and where we don't know the people, then we should be very careful. And this can be also when you're traveling, for example, that sometimes you can go into a place, you can go into a city where there's lots of thieves. It can even happen at airports, or um, even people who look official, they can deceive you. So you really have to have your wits about you. So every time you go out, basically, that's the thing that we need to um, be wary of. Like you saw that the dervish, he went into a different inn, and there were lots of people there, and you know, he didn't even, because he was very trusting. When they started treating him with this false honor, he didn't even pick up on it. He didn't pick up that maybe like it's not, they were after something. So we have to, this story is also teaching us that we have to learn human psychology. We have to learn where people are coming from. There are very good people in the world, and there are evil people, and there are in between people. So as we go along in life, and this, a lot of this comes from life experience. As you get older, you learn that how to figure out the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, if you don't know, if you are not sure, then you should listen to your own instinct. Like, as you have an instinct, you should listen to your instinct about whether something is good, a situation is good or it's not good. Or if you don't know, then don't get involved. That's the best policy, because you'll save yourself from many troubles. So that's another thing that we learn. So this story is about, we've gone into a different world here, because we're talking about a dervish, the traveling dervishes, and many people who actually used to live like this. And there's a deep point here, because we are made to think that we can only survive in the world if we have what everybody else has, right? And this is where a lot of insecurity comes from, that we have to have the house, we have to have the cars, we have to have this, we have to, otherwise, and we won't feel secure until we have all of that. But that is not true, because you can survive in the world. There's actually movements now where people are surviving on very minimal. It's called the minimalist movement, and it means that people are surviving on very, very little. They're choosing to live in very small houses with very few things. They're choosing to grow their own food, so they're not dependent on going to the store and buying lots of food. So we can survive with very little in this world. We actually don't need a lot. And there were lots of people like this who would just travel and wander around, and they would live their life like that, and they lived quite happily. So that's another thing that we learn from this story too, that we whatever we need in this world, Allah will give it to us. That's tawakkul. And also, we don't need a lot of material things. We don't have to have a lot of things to be happy, because many times in the way we're living right now is that we think that we're not going to be happy until we have X, Y, and Z. That when we get that, we will be happy, but that's not true. So there's lots of things to think about in this story. And so that was our first story today. And um, the main thing was about blind imitation. So that, again, that is about, we have to be careful about what we follow, how we follow it, and we really have to, when people are doing something, we really have to step back and think that what are the implications of this, or what is it that they're doing, and what's the deeper meanings of it. Because people, we don't want to think, and we're living in a world where we just have to follow. That's not true. we have to be a people who think. So I hope you like that story. And I'm going to read another small story, smaller story now, and it's called Escape from Death. So it's said that one day, a little before noon, when the Prophet Solomon was sitting in his audience chamber in Jerusalem, a flustered man rushed in. It was plain from his appearance that he was terrified and frightened. What's wrong? What do you want? Solomon asked him. Oh, great one, the man began. I have just seen Israel, the angel of death, today. He looked at me angrily but passed me by. I'm afraid that he will come back and take my life. Calm down, Solomon said. Israel is one of the angels, and he brings life and takes it back only at the command of God. He won't do anything until he receives his order. I could see Israel every day, but I would not be afraid. But just because you are afraid, what can I do and what do you want from me? But, the man replied, I have always been afraid of Israel. Today, when I saw his angry look, I grew even more afraid. People say that the wind obeys Solomon. You can order the wind to take me to another land. People say that Solomon helps the needy. What I need now is that you immediately command the wind to carry me to India. Now that Israel has seen me in this country, I don't want to stay here a moment longer. This is my need and this is my request. Help me to escape Israel and death. So, what is the man asking Sulaiman alayhi salam? So, this is the Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, who is mentioned in the Quran, and we know that he was a king too. He was the only prophet who was a king, and he was a very mighty king. He wasn't just the king of people, he was the king of the jinn, he was the king of animals, he was the king of birds, and he had power to do airbending. Now, you understand what airbending is, that he could move things with the wind. So people could travel from one place to another, very much like how we travel in a plane today, right? Maybe even faster than that. So they could go from one country to another very, very fast. So this man, he came to Sulaiman alayhi salam and he said that I want you, because I've seen Israel, the angel of death now, and he's seen me and he looked very angry. I don't want to be here anymore in this country. So you command the wind to carry me to India. So he just picked a country and he said, I want to go to India. Very well, Solomon declared. Life and death are not in my hands, but the winds are. I shall fulfill your request. Lo, I command the wind to take you wherever you want to go. Solomon ordered the wind to come before him and addressed it thus: Ask where this man wants to go and take him there. So the wind placed the man on the flying carpet of Solomon, crossing deserts and rivers. The wind carried him far away to one of the cities of India within a few minutes. The man dismounted from the carpet and went about his own affairs. So the man actually did get to India in a few minutes. Wow. So Sulaiman alayhi salam's carpet, magic carpet, and you've always heard of this magic carpet and read about it. So it's faster than our modern transportation. Wow. So that day passed. On the next day, Solomon met Israel in the palace and spoke with him. Israel, a man came in to me yesterday complaining about you. He asked me to order the wind to take him immediately to India to get as far away as he could from this city. I didn't want to disappoint him, so I did as he asked and sent him to India. But I wonder, why did you frighten him so much that you caused him to abandon his home and his business? Israel, the angel of death, replied, I never do anything without the express command of Allah. I did not look at that man with anger. Yesterday I saw him in Jerusalem, and my look at him was one of astonishment, because I had received the command from God to take the soul of that very man in India, I was saying to myself, even if he could fly like a bird, he would never be able to reach India by the afternoon. Since his hour of death had not yet come, I looked at him with astonishment and passed him by. But later, at the proper time, I went to India and saw him there. Death took him there, and I seized his soul. So, what had happened? The man was trying to escape death, right? The man was trying to escape death, but death will find you wherever you are. When it's appointed hour, then the angel will come and take out your soul. So let's finish the story. Solomon nodded, saying, that is so. You can escape from everything, but death is certain and cannot be escaped. It was his destiny to be in India at that moment. Since there was no means to carry him there except the wind, he himself came to me on his own feet and with his own tongue begged me and pleaded with me to send him there. And so he went to meet his destiny. Subhanallah. So we learn from this story that wherever our death is written, we will go to that place. So it's not necessary that the land that you live in, you're going to die there, right? Because your death is written somewhere. It could be written anywhere in the world, right? And wherever your death is written, you will end up there, and the angel of death, Israel, will come and take out your soul there. That's why you'll see sometimes people travel to far away places and they die over there. Like I knew a man, and when we were growing up, he was a shopkeeper, and he sold lots of uh, material cloth which we make dresses out of. So he would source cloth from all over the world, and he would have the best kind of silks, and some of it came from China, some came from Japan, and he knew the history of that cloth. He was very passionate about his work. So if you went into his shop, he would tell you, this has just come in, and this come from this place, and this is like 100% silk, and you've got these colors in it, and this is how much it costs, and he would give you the whole story about it. Now this man never traveled because he was so busy in his shop, and every day he would come in and open up, and he would stay there till late, and then he would go home. And when he became quite old, and I would say that maybe like 70 years old, he took a trip, and it was advertised that they were taking a trip to the steppes. Now, if you know, these are the places where Azerbaijan and all of these places where Imam Bukhari lived, and they did a whole tour there. So they went for a week. So he was really excited because this was like the best trip and the only trip of his life. So he was really excited to take this trip because he said, all my life I've worked. This is going to be my first trip, and from now onwards, whenever there's organized groups going to anywhere, I'm going to join them, and I'm going to go and spend the rest of my life just looking at the world and looking at the marvels of the world, because and his work had been such that he had heard about all these places, where all these exotic things came from, but he'd never been there. So anyway, he got ready for this trip, and he packed, and he was very happy to join the group, and they went on this trip. And when they got there, it was a very intense trip. So they were moving from city to city. Like they would spend one night in a city and then get back on the coach and go to another city and then see the main things. It was a very fast-paced trip. And so when he was going on this trip, he was looking at everything, and he was in awe. And then on the third day, he reached a place, and he'd always admired this place. and he was in the masjid praying, and he passed away. Subhanallah. This man who had never come out of his house, and he had come out, and he was in a strange land where he didn't know anybody, he didn't even know the language, and he passed away. So you may have heard of many stories like this where people they travel to far off places, and they die there. Why? The reason is that the where you're going to die is already written. That ground that you are going to be buried in has your name on it. It's already got your name on it. So you shouldn't worry about where you're going to die, right? Because it already has your name. So you're going to end up in that place somehow, and you will die in that place. Now, there's two reasons why we travel. One is that either you're going to be die in that place, so you have to go there, or the second reason is that your risk is written over there. Risk means what everything that you eat and what you interact with in the world, right? Your food, etc., etc. So if your food is written in a place, you will travel to that place. Maybe you'll make a very long journey, and you'll be in that city for one night and eat that one meal. And you might think, why did I travel for so long? My plane journey was like 12 hours, and then I had a transit over here for like 8 hours, and I ate this one meal. Well, you had to go there because your name was written on that food. So you had to eat that food. So there's two reasons why we travel. Either your food is written somewhere, or not just food. Risk means everything that you interact with. Maybe you're going to meet somebody, or you have to spend some money there, you have to spend some time there, right? So your risk is either written there, or your death is written there. So that's the two reasons why we go to different places. So this story, yeah, is really very powerful because it's telling us that the man tried to escape death, and it was in a time when travel to distant lands took months and months and months. But he came, and he had heard that Sulaiman alayhi salam, in your modern terms you call it, did wind bending, right? That he had control over the winds. And so he said, you have to transport me to India. And he just chose a random place, right? They were in Jerusalem, and he wanted to go to India. So he chose that place, and he said that I want to go there, and um, I'm going to escape death. But then Malakul Maut knew that he was going to take this man's soul out in India. He was so surprised to see him in the markets of Jerusalem. And he said, I have to take this man's soul out in a few hours, and he's wandering around in Jerusalem, and how's he going to get to India? Right? So he was looking at him in astonishment. But the man, he thought that Israel was looking at him with anger. And maybe he looks like that. Maybe he looks very scary. So that's why he came running to Sulaiman alayhi salam. And Sulaiman alayhi salam's story is very fascinating. It's in the Quran. It's could he would command the jinns, and they would make magnificent buildings for him, right? And these buildings exist today. Subhanallah. Like if you go to Jerusalem, you can see the stables of Sulaiman alayhi salam, where they used to keep the horses, and each brick, each stone of that building is huge. You think it's impossible for men to carry such a big stone and put it all the way up there, right? And those buildings are made with natural air conditioning. So even though it was so hot, those buildings would still be naturally air conditioned in Sulaiman alayhi salam's time. So you wonder how they made these things. So the jinns were the ones who were the architects, and they were the builders. And not only that, they even made palaces for Sulaiman alayhi salam, and they would dive deep into the oceans and bring out pearls and other precious jewels. and they would make furniture out of it and decorate his home with it. So, subhanAllah, that was a very lavish time. And Sulaiman Islam was a very mighty king. So, in this story, Rumi is um, bringing us to a Sulaiman alayhi salam, and also he's bringing us, showing us about death, that death can come at any time, and also where we're going to die, how we're going to die, and where we're going to be buried is also written. It's already maktub, it's been written, so we don't need to worry about it. That is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of. Right, so we're going to end with this story today, and um, if you have any questions, you can text me the questions. I hope you like this story. Please comment on the stories if you like them, and we will continue next week, inshallah. And I want you to think about the stories. I'm going to conclude with saying that these are thinking stories too, because you have to think about all the elements in that story and the different things that happen. So I want you to think about the story, and you can also relate it to our times as well. You can, because like these teaching stories are universal and they relate to all times. So I want you to relate it to our times as well and how they're relevant today. So I'm going to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'll see you all next week, inshallah. If you have any comments, then please leave them for me, or suggestions about this online youth halaqah. This is youth halaqah that we're doing, and we will continue next week, inshallah. So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.